deadly coronavirus officially hitting the U.S.
The number of people filing for unemployment benefits.
New York and California and Illinois are in lockdown mode.
More teachers are pushing back on in-person learning, questioning their own safety.
Violent protests erupted overnight.
I warned you. I warned the world that this would come. Man, that 2020, they say. Could 2020 get any worse?
That's the worst thing that could happen this year. I mean, what else could go wrong?
The memes, the jokes.
Looks like I'm talking to the new worst year ever.
This isn't funny.
We laugh it off like this year is just a fluke.
Come on, G! U.S. death toll.
Like this year's disaster.
150,000.
After disaster.
Look what you did to my store.
After disaster. Aren't all legitimate tragedies, but then used in a larger plan by the global elite to destroy the Western and capitalist world. But I'm telling you, I warned you.
Tonight's show is a warning.
Event 201.
There are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
The forced recession. Agenda 30.
You know, every crisis is an opportunity.
And now the waves of civil unrest. The violence that George Soros himself predicted months ago would come. Predicted would throw a wrench into the re-election of Donald Trump. It's all connected. And the most powerful people in the world are using all of it to achieve their brave new world. The insanity we've experienced this year will be used as the catalyst that they need to reset our economy. They're already naming it, planning it.
Now is the historical moment, the time.
They're not even trying to hide it.
We have to change our economy dramatically.
The Great Reset will become known in history as the plan that spread National Socialism around the world. The one that changed the free world forever. Tonight, Brave New World, the left's march towards global fascism.
Some people may say this is too idealistic, but what other choice do we have? At least we have to try. We may fail, and next generations, or even we ourselves, will have to pay the price for our failure. At least we should try.
Hello, America. I want to talk to you tonight, but I need you to keep an open mind. If you have been with me for a long time, you know. You're never surprised by anything that happens because we are way ahead of it. I told you about a coming caliphate that happened with ISIS. I told you in 2006 that we were going to head for a massive crash. We did in 2008. I also told you, and it hasn't come yet, that the money bubble after the crash of 2008, a money bubble would happen, and it would be the bubble of everything. That is yet to happen. I told you that revolution was on the horizon all over the world, including in America. I told you that Islamists, radicals, Antifa, communists, socialists would all work together to overthrow capitalism. And you're seeing this now on the streets. We have gone through an awful lot together. And every time I'm called insane, a conspiracy theorist. I'm not, actually. Well, I might be insane, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I look for evidence and I listen to people's words and I take them at their word. And that leads you to places that make you uncomfortable. And so your friends will just shrug it off. Tonight, you must not do that. You must do your own homework. Do not take anything I tell you tonight as gospel truth. You must know it yourself, and it's all out in the open. We found it on their own websites. They're not even hiding anymore. They are telling us what's coming next. No one is listening. We are. Anytime you hear someone say, it might be too idealistic to try, but what choice do we have? It's probably a very good idea to take a step back and say, wait, what are you suggesting? I can tell you one thing. By the end of tonight's show, you will know exactly what is going on, and you will know who is involved, what they're trying to do, and how they plan on doing it. We will give you the evidence, and we will direct you to their own websites. I suggest you find them and archive them we have a history of pointing these things out, and within 24 hours, those websites have changed. But I need to connect several of shows that we have done over the last few months and some of the theories that we've been talking about over the past decade. We revealed progressives, global socialism, Agenda 21, the response to the coronavirus, the planned, actually forced economic recession, and those responsible for the waves of civil unrest. We've done that over the last 6 or 8 months, and everything is connected. It's the same people over and over. And the political and financial elites of the world are conspiring, but they're doing it openly. But no one will listen. And they are going to bring forth their brave new world. And it is, as people say, I can't wait to get back to normal. We are not going back unless you wake up. Now, they're not calling it, a brave new world exactly, but that's what it is. The left, if anything, they are good marketers. They are calling it the Great Reset. And it is a worldwide open plot to destroy capitalism, the Western world, and reshape it closer to their heart's desire. It'll affect every aspect of your life, how you raise your family, your job, the company you work for, the property you own, the education you get, everything. Everyone is on board, including Fortune 500 CEOs, banking, monarchies, highest echelons of political power all over the globe. The way they see it, the clock is ticking. They have exactly 9.5 years to pull it all off. And the coronavirus and, quote, the revolutionary situation in the streets are the final catalyst. It is the way they're going to push it through. I've been trying lately to look back at what has been happening over the past few weeks, even the last few years, to see what and who is all connected. And the amount of dots that have materialized, or just in the past few months, are staggering. All of these topics for specials every Wednesday night are chosen for a purpose. Most of the time, they are issues that the media just conflates and it just gives us such a horrible look at it if we look at it at all. And they do it in such a way that no one can even talk about it. And if you do, you're blacklisted or demonetized on places like YouTube or Facebook, and you sound like a conspiracy theorist. It's because it is very complex. But if you break it down show after show, it all makes sense. That's why we've decided to stop playing their stupid little games. We concentrate on what we need to concentrate on this program every Wednesday. Those shows are protected, honestly, by you, Blaze TV. This is the network that you built for times like these, and I want to thank you for being a subscriber. It is because of you that we can continue to get the word out. Please share this information with your family and friends and encourage them to subscribe. Help us continue our research. If anything, show them what I'm about to say right now. I have this portion available on YouTube for you to share, at least until it inevitably gets taken down. But I want to look back over the past few months of this show because all of the dots are now connecting. Remember the global pandemic war game that we told you about on the episode Event 201? This was a war game where business leaders, medical professionals, and government officials at the highest levels met in New York to run a simulation of what might happen if the world got this, a coronavirus. What happens if it was unleashed on the world? Well, that happened last October 2019, 4 months before the actual coronavirus cases began popping up in China. Kind of sounds a little relevant, doesn't it? But the media didn't want anyone to talk about it. It's all out online. You can watch it. They predicted in that conference before coronavirus was unleashed in China that 65 million people would be dead in the end. 65 million. Something would have to change, and an overriding theme was clear amongst the attendees.
The scenario also highlights the very critical role that global business and public-private partnerships play in preparing for and responding to pandemics.
And we know from past responses that public-private cooperation will be essential.
We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
Okay, public-private partnership, something we've grown accustomed to, but we shouldn't have. It's the merging of private business with the government. And it's big business. It's not the business down the street. It's big business. I told you how the dots are being connected. I want you to look on who put this little war game on. It was Johns Hopkins University, Bill and Melinda Gates, and something called the World Economic Forum. We're going to come back to them in just a minute. In another previous segment, I showed you that the UN's plan for global socialism was masked under the fight against climate change. I told you they were very good at marketing Agenda 21. We exposed that, and it had to be rebranded into Agenda 2030. And then everybody stopped talking about it. It's all about one thing, and that is control. They established 17 sustainable development goals to provide, quote, a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for the people and the planet now and in the future. They go on, quote, ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. This all sounds great by itself. Except it's a utopia, and if we're all forced into it by a government, it's a communist utopia. Oh, yeah, and those countries and those systems will never, ever protect an environment. Agenda 2030 is actually all about inventory and control. How many people are there? Where do they live? How do they move? Do they live in cities that they control? The Sustainable Development Goal 11 talks about, quote, integrated and sustainable human settlement planning and management with a, quote, ratio of land consumption rate to population growth rate. You see, to Agenda 2030, people are a disease. They need to be taken out of rural areas and herded into cities. I wish I had more time to go through all of this, but there are several books that we wrote on it and several shows we dedicated. But there is a reason you might have noticed that farmland is being claimed by eminent domain in states all over the country. Government control of private business is the ultimate goal. You'll notice the Fed is bailing out all of the big corporations, but all of the American entrepreneurs are being slaughtered right now in this pandemic. In some circles, it's called National Socialism, what's going on. I use that phrase and I'm going to use it again. I don't want you to get stuck on National Socialism. I don't know what to call this. They won't call it National Socialism. It's not exactly communism. It's not exactly National Socialism, but it's the closest to that. It's authoritarianism, global control. Now, where have we heard National Socialism before? Well, usually by the genocidal psychopaths with very small mustaches. And it's odd that the same conclusion of the architects of Agenda 2030 were also the conclusions from the event 201. The answer is no, it's really not a coincidence because they are the same people. And I want to go through some of them. Bill and Melinda Gates, who co-sponsored the event, have made advocating for Agenda 2030 as one of their main endeavors. They produce this report. It's called Goal Keepers. Every year they produce this to ensure all 17 Sustainable Development Goals happen by the year 2030. Multiple other participants are directly linked to Agenda 2030. Sofia Borges, she's the UN Foundation's senior vice president. She was the chief negotiator from the UN, compelling countries to adopt Agenda 2030. Then there's Eduardo Martinez. He's an executive at UPS and also serves on Impact 2030, a coalition to, quote, advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and on the board of the United Nations Public-Private Sector Coalition. There it is again. Public-private, the merging of public and private sectors. I'm going to show you how they plan to pull that off later on in the show, and it is staggering. Back in April, I showed you how the economic recession that we're now in was something that we've never seen before because it was done to us on purpose. It was all handed to the president, already packaged as a plan. It wasn't a question of if the coronavirus shutdown was going to put us into recession. Recession was the plan. This from the CEO and the 12th president of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, James Bullard. Quote, "This is a planned, organized, partial shutdown of the U.S. economy. We are throttling back output on purposes to meet health guidelines, transfer income to affected households, call it pandemic relief, get transfers to the businesses that are affected heavily, and come out on the other side. Identical economy. Produce the same goods as before." But that's really not what is going on. And it sounds nice, but there was another agenda. Our economy and our banking system was collapsing. This is a reset. And they threw the obscene virus fatality and economic numbers at us to scare everyone into compliance. The Fed said that the unemployment rate by June would be 32%. Now, let's put that into perspective. 32% unemployment is 3 times higher than what you and I experienced in the Great Recession and higher than what our great-grandparents and grandparents experienced in the Great Depression. Well, the numbers for June have now come out. Was the Fed correct? Well, the unemployment rate is 11.1 and going down, so they missed it by a factor of 3. Does the Fed just suck? Spoiler alert, they do, but is there something else going on here? The sensationalizing has not stopped. A couple of weeks ago, it was reported that the U.S. economy suffered its worst plunge ever with a decline of 32.9% in the second quarter. Well, that is much worse than the Great Depression. The Biden campaign then used that to show how badly Donald Trump was handling the crisis. Quote, the depth of economic devastation our nation is experiencing is not an act of God. It's a failure of presidential leadership. Well, maybe that would be true if the number was true, but the number is not true. Like all of the sensationalized unemployment figures from the Fed, the GDP number was distorted. The real number is 9.5, and everybody who knows anything knew it. 32.9 is the annual, meaning the GDP would have to decline by the current rate for 4 straight quarters. We were only talking about 1. We're actually doing better than countries in Europe. Germany's second quarter decline was over 10%. So what's going on? Why the trickery? Well, the truth is they need you to be scared. They need you to be freaked out by the pandemic. They needed it to be worse. They need the economy to be worse. Everything they need, they need to get Donald Trump out of there because they're about to usher in a new era. Biden claimed that the president's policies have caused the crisis, but the Trump advocacy for reopening the economy is the exact reason we don't have 32% unemployment and a 32% decline in GDP. They frightened the country into compliance, and now they're beating us over the head if we dare step out of line. And simultaneously, as people began to freely give up their constitutional rights, a wave of civil unrest spread all over the country. We've been exposing the rioting, not the protests, the rioting for weeks now. Everyone from Marxist leadership of Black Lives Matter, the 60s era radicals that helped them, and their alliance with both Islamists and anarchists like Antifa, the usual suspects have all been identified, including spooky dude George Soros. Now, the world economic experts told us that everything would be okay if we just all agreed to ridiculously cut our wrists and bleed in the tub. They said that a V-shaped economic plan would happen, and we would dive down, and then they'd turn it back on, and we'd go back up in 6 weeks. The economy would take that nosedive, but then we would restart. It had never been tried before. Who came up with this plan? We showed you on this program. Donald Trump and a few conservative governors are trying to make this happen, but guess who's not happy about restarting the engine? The Fed said this Monday that we have to put the brakes on and shut everything back down. I kid you not. The Fed wants the economic doomsday numbers to come true. Why? Because restarting was never the plan. A great reset is what they planned. Now, what does that mean? Well, I mentioned George Soros earlier and looking into his ties with the current street rioters, and that's what led us to this answer. And it is worse than you can imagine.